your side. This is First Coast News at 5.
And first at 5, we are following that breaking news alert. A heartbreaking day here in our nation, here in Florida, as there has been a school shooting, this time in South Florida. You were taking a look at the scene just before 3 o'clock this afternoon as gunfire erupted inside one of the largest high schools in Broward County. You can see groups of students running out, their hands above their heads. Larger group of students took cover on nearby streets and even underneath trees. Tonight, the Broward County Sheriff confirming that the suspect has been captured. This is aerial video of someone being placed into a patrol car, later put on a gurney near the school while wearing handcuffs. And tonight, we know that at least 14 people have been transported to the hospital, victims of this shooting. A school official saying that there are, quote, numerous fatalities. However, it is unclear how many of those, if any, are fatal wounds. Emergency crews setting up triage centers on a nearby corner.
And dozens of authorities could be seen surrounding that school, along with SWAT teams and vehicles rolling into the parking lot. This as they continue to evacuate the school building. So this is all happening about 300 miles down the Florida Turnpike in the town of Parkland. The shooting taking place inside Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Like we mentioned earlier, this is one of the largest schools in Broward County. On your screen, you're about to take a look at live aerials right there. Over the past hour, we've seen dozens of parents rushing to the scene to search for and reunite with their frightened children. As you can imagine, this is a heartbreaking day. On the left side of your screen, cell phone videos shot by people from near the scene. Here's NBC's Chris Pallone with the latest at this hour.
Oh my God!
Broward County, Florida, reports of an active shooter. It happened before 3 o'clock at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. Parents and police raced to the scene. Tactical teams surrounded the school as parents texted with their children still barricaded inside. An ambulance rushed at least one person away. There are reports of more injuries, but it's unclear right now how many. As police searched for the gunman, students ran from the building with their hands in the air. One man talked to his sister by phone after she made it out alive.
She answered the phone just trembling and in shock that she saw people being shot at, and luckily she was able to make it out.
The school has about 3,000 students. The school district tweeted the shooting started just before dismissal. President Trump has been briefed on the shooting and has tweeted his condolences to the victims. Around 4 o'clock, more than an hour after the shooting, police were spotted putting a man in handcuffs into a police car. Moments later, the sheriff's office tweeted that a suspect is in custody. Parents are waiting to reunite with their children as this tragedy continues to unfold. This is at least the 13th school shooting in the United States this year. Chris Pallone, NBC News.
So let's talk more now about President Trump's response to this. He has sent 2 tweets in just the past hour. The first saying, "My prayers and condolences to the families of the victims of the terrible Florida school shooting. No child, teacher, or anyone else should ever feel unsafe in an American school." That was followed by another tweet saying, "Just spoke to Governor Rick Scott. We are working closely with law enforcement on the terrible Florida school shooting."
And we want to continue our coverage now with WTVJ, the NBC station in Miami. Let's listen.
We're talking about the high school. Let's not forget about the middle school. And the middle school students have communications coming to me from parents whose kids are in the middle school. Let's go out to Ari Yatzer. He's out there on the scene.
Willard, we're on Coral Ridge Drive. As I've been reporting all afternoon, we are south of the Sawgrass Expressway because police won't let us go to the north side where the school is. We're about a mile or so away from Stoneman Douglas High School. As you mentioned, the middle school, West Glades Middle School, is right next door. We were just there on Monday for Brag About Your School. This community's pride in its schools cannot be understated. As Trina Robinson just said, she lives here in this community. This place has excellent schools. Stoneman Douglas is one of the top-rated schools in all of Florida, if not the nation. Excellence in every way, every field of endeavor. So the fact that it can happen here just is an indication that this can happen anywhere. And as we've seen over the years with school shootings, they often happen at suburban schools that have wealthy parents and wealthy PTAs. That doesn't have anything to do with the mental psychosis that drives a student or an ex-student or someone to come in to a school property and do something evil like this. Zach Gordon is a junior here at the school at Stoneman Douglas. Zach, from your perspective, what did you see? What did you hear?
At 2:19 p.m. we heard the fire alarm, and like as soon as we heard that, like everyone walked outside, and like I started hearing kids saying, "Oh my God, there's like shots," and like obviously like no one would believe anything like that would ever happen, like especially like at our school, like what you were saying, like you just wouldn't expect that to happen. And then after we started seeing people running, after I started seeing people running, I heard 6 shots, loud shots. Right after I heard that, I was like, oh my God, we gotta go. So I started running as fast as I can through the grass. There was swamp on my left, there was water, and then there was like prickly bushes and stuff, but we just kept going, and like people were just like recording stuff on Snapchat, and like I was just like, oh, everyone just keep going. Like there was people that needed help. Like I was helping people get over the fence. Like I just grabbed my bag and just pulled myself up as hard as I can, and then like after we did that, we just started running to West Glades Middle School. And then once we got past there, they told us to go to Walmart, and I called my dad to pick me up. But like it's just like something you would never expect to happen. But like
surreal.
It's crazy moment. Like you just never would think anything like this would happen. Like you can tell, like just look at like around, like you never see anything like this before, like especially like up close and like in person, and like be able to hear the shots. Like that's just something that's crazy. And my sister was stuck in the room, and like she just got out 20 minutes ago. She's like hysterically like upset. Like it's just like this is like a moment that like you just will never forget. Just like something insane. Like, you know what I mean?
You said you were helping kids, other fellow classmates, getting through over the fence or something. Is that what was going on?
Yeah, like people like needed me to like grab their bag, and like there was girls struggling. Like we were just trying to help everyone. Like everyone was saying, just like help everyone. Like, you know, like we're all in this together. Like everyone just like run. Like everyone just help each other. You know what I mean? Like it was just a crazy moment. Like something.
Hold on 1 second. You guys have a question?
Yes, Ari, I have a question to ask that student, because he said he was helping other students go over the fence. Were they getting any indication from any teachers, any guidance as to where they should go when all of this was happening?
Jackie Nespral wants to know if there was any adults, any teachers, faculty, anybody saying, hey, where should you go, giving you guidance.
So, okay, so what happened was my teacher, I'm not going to say his name, but my teacher, we were all walking with him, and then like I asked him, and he was like, I think they're shots. And like when he said that, I was like, okay, something's really happening. And after that, I didn't see any teacher. We were all running alone. There was no staff with us. We saw one of our security guards riding in a golf cart, pushing. He was like, go, go, go. And
telling you to get to safety?
Telling us to go, like just get out. Like wherever we were behind a fence. There was 150 people. Everyone was going slow. I was telling everyone, move, move. Like, you know, like we gotta go. Like we gotta get out of here. We kept hearing shots. We don't know what's happening. We don't know if there's a guy sitting on top of the roof sniping. Like we don't know what's going on at the time. And like we just have to go.
Nobody else probably knew either.
No one else knew. Everyone was just in shock. Like everyone, like people thought it was a joke at first, and like it really wasn't. Like as soon as we heard the shots, we're like, this is a real thing. This is like what you hear about on TV. This is just something you would never expect for it to happen to you, and you just never know. Just gotta always be alert.
Hey Ari,
always stay safe.
Ari, one more question, if you don't mind,
yes, Jackie.
Because we're getting conflicting reports as to whether there was a fire drill this morning at the school, and maybe he can answer that question for us as well.
Well, I've already heard from 2 students so far that there was a fire drill this morning at the school.
Yeah,
there was a fire drill.
So there was
second period, and that's why when the bell rang, when the fire alarm rang at 2:19, no one expected anything that was going to happen. Like we all just were like, oh, someone pulled the fire alarm. Like we were all walking out of class casually. Like our teacher was like, leave the stuff in the room, and like somehow I grabbed my backpack, and thank God I did, because I had all my stuff in it, and just like we just had no clue that like anything would be a shooting. And as soon as we started seeing people running, we knew we got to go. We have to.
The reason that question is being asked is because there's a theory that the shooter himself pulled the fire alarm just to get kids out of the classroom. And the reason that would happen is because public school classes in all of South Florida are locked throughout the day. You can't just walk into a room. Somebody has to let you in. So by pulling the fire alarm, it would cause everybody to come out and presumably give this guy easier targets.
Ari,
so when you think
question.
of that, you're thinking, how evil must this guy be?
It's just insane. That's just a crazy thought. Like in our case, like by him pulling the fire alarm, that was like our escape. But for the kids in the freshman building, man, I pray for every single kid that got hurt, like their families, everything. Like I just hope everyone's okay. No one like anything serious. Like I just really hope everyone's okay, because I mean I go to school with these kids every day. I would never want to see anyone get hurt. You know what I mean? Like that's just not the type of person I am. So
Ari,
you haven't had time to process this yet. This just happened. So in your head, are you still in a state of shock, do you think?
I'm shocked. I don't know how long it's gonna last, but I'm shocked. I still can't believe this happened. I still can't believe I got out. I'm just blessed that like I was able to get out, but like for everyone else, like I just hope everyone else is gonna be okay, and like all that kind of stuff.
Jackie, you had another question?
Yes, I have another question because we heard Sheriff Scott Israel say that this was not a student at the school. He was 18 years old. So I wanted to ask him what kind of security measures are in place for the students when they enter the school on campus, and is there a fence that surrounds the school? Are there
Yes,
security officers on the scene?
I can answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, I can answer that question. I was just at the school last week, as a matter of fact, because we shot a story, one of our students working at Greatness Stories. Like it is at every public school in South Florida, there is one point of entry at this school. You have to come in through the office. There's no other way to get into the building, and you have to be checked in at the office to get past the general office area. They take your ID, they check to see who you are. They know who we are with NBC6 because we're in schools all the time. So the secretary immediately knew who I was, but still had to check our ID, still had to put our ID through the system because that's the procedure that we go through every time. So if this kid was not a student, if this young man was not a student and he still got into the school, I don't know how he did that. Do you have any clue how he would do that?
I heard that he was a student, but honestly I've never seen him around. But our school is very safe about that kind of stuff. We don't just let anyone in our school. So for this to happen, it's just really sad, and I hope that the procedures change now, especially with something like this tragic happening.
Yeah, thank you, Zach, for joining us. I'm glad you're okay. The situation here with who can get onto campus, there might have been, if he's a former student, perhaps he knew somebody, perhaps he said hi to somebody, perhaps he was allowed in that way, perhaps he came in legitimately through the front office with a pass or to visit a former teacher if he's a former student here, if he's an alumnus. Who knows exactly what that situation is. Sneaking onto campus can be done, of course. Even these aren't fail-safe systems at every school. I guess you could sneak onto a campus somewhere, but without speculating as to what happened here, we just simply don't know how he got onto campus if he wasn't a student. Perhaps he came in through the front door legitimately and was able to hide a firearm and still got in. That's always a possibility. We simply don't know yet, Jackie.
Thank you. You know, one thing, and I was talking about this earlier as a parent, and Ari, you know as well, I mean, it's got to be heck right now for any parent that hasn't been able to communicate with their loved one, with their children, with some of the students on campus. Of course, we are being told that they are still on lockdown. They've only been able to release students in groups, and Sheriff Scott Israel said that the buildings aren't safe to be cleared yet. So that's an important distinction. But he also said that parents should go to the Marriott at Heron Bay complex, and that's where parents can go and get any information that's out there where they can get information on their children.
Jackie, the latest information I have from the police department and inside the police department is that the SWAT teams are going to different locations, going building by building, and that process continues. We spoke with the superintendent of schools, Dr. Runcie, a short time ago, and here's what he had to say about this unfortunate tragedy.
Can't confirm the number at this point, but there are fatalities involved here.
Can you tell us at least how many transports? Do you know, maybe a dozen?
I don't know the number that's been transported at this point, but again, there are numerous fatalities. It's a horrific situation. It's just a horrible day for us. And
we got reports of multiple shooters. Can you confirm that?
I'm sorry, what's that?
That there were more than one shooter?
No, at this point we have no evidence that there's been more than one shooter. The individual, again, we believe has been apprehended. I would leave it to the sheriff to provide you additional details around that.
Mr. Runcie told us they saw a teacher who was dead. Is that confirmed by you, a teacher shot in his classroom?
I believe there's an administrator or teacher that is involved. There may be more. I can't confirm if that's been one of the fatalities at the moment.
Superintendent, this is a day I'm sure every superintendent fears to happen here in Broward.
It's a day that you pray every day. I get up that we will never have to see. It is in front of us, and I ask the community for your prayers, your support for these children and their families. We're going to do whatever we can to come together as a community to pull through this, and we will.
You have been listening to Superintendent Robert Runcie right now addressing some of the questions from the media out there. What he knows right now is that there are multiple fatalities. When he was asked if one of those fatalities was a teacher or administrator, he said he had heard something of that nature, but he wasn't able to confirm that. Once again, we also saw Barbara Sharif there along with Superintendent Robert Runcie and Sheriff Scott Israel. Another report that we heard from the sheriff, Willard, is that there were shots fired inside and outside of the schools. So that would mean, and of course because you're military, that he had some type of firearm with
multiple rounds to be able to do that, or magazines. Right? That's always a fear in this about this kind of thing, that one person can do so much damage because of these kinds of automatic weapons, even if it's the kind of simply what we call a sidearm and not a rifle-style weapon. So that's always a concern. And when you hear about multiple fatalities, and also we've already been told by the sheriff that 14 people were transported to the hospital. The information I had from the fire rescue paramedics that there were 18 that were transported. That tells you that the person had a significant amount of ammunition and the ability to be able to shoot multiple people, and therefore reloading clips quickly and these kinds of things is something that takes place in these kinds of situations. And shooting inside and outside the school with multiple victims says, yes, he's got multiple firearms or the ability to quickly reload.
You know, something interesting, because Ari was talking to that student, Zach, who said there really wasn't any guidance in terms of teachers or administrators as to what should they do, which begs the question. I know that they have trained for emergency situations in schools, so what happened? Why didn't they put those into place, the standard operating procedure in an emergency situation like this?
Well, I mean, to this point, we know that these plans that they had in place, they obviously executed them. The biggest thing that I'm gathering out of this is about the access to the school property.
Right.
And what Ari's talked about with that student out there, about the processes, procedures to get inside the schools, and all schools in South Florida has certainly toughened those procedures. But a key element here is that this individual was known to some people on the campus, that he was a former student, he had some association with the school, and simply by facial recognition, that may have allowed him to do something that a complete stranger would not have been able to in terms of getting access to the property.
Yeah, absolutely. And presumably he would have a bag, a backpack, something where he had the weapons inside. So that's going to be a major question for investigators to decipher once all of this is said and done. Let's go to Michael Spears right now, who's live with some new information. Michael, what can you tell us?
Well, we're live at the Wyndham Lakes development, Jackie. Right now, police have this development blocked off. You can see some of the law enforcement officers behind me. This is where that suspect was taken into custody earlier this afternoon. It's right off of Coral Ridge Drive in Coral Springs. As I mentioned, police do have this area blocked off. Within the last 15 minutes, we spoke to a man who gave us new cell phone video. We're in the process of getting that edited and flipped to air for all of you, but in the meantime, I can describe what it shows. Earlier, this man in his car driving in this development, he said it was on the other side from where we're standing here, but the same development, when law enforcement just swarmed the area, and that's when we see in the video a suspect on the side of the road, face down, with multiple law enforcement officers around him, putting him into handcuffs. Right now, a lot of questions remain. We don't know where this suspect was going. At this time, we do know it appeared he was on the sidewalk around the grassy area, so not necessarily directly in front of a door, so we don't know where he was going. We don't know if this suspect lives here as well, or if he was injured while being taken into custody. But at this point, we have a bunch of neighbors just out here in this development. As you can imagine, just standing here listening to siren after siren pass by, gridlock traffic in this area, a lot of confusion, and of course, a lot of folks sad right now, devastated when we talk about these injury numbers that at last check continue to rise as far as those transported, at least 14, some sources saying 20 students hurt. So again, right now, Wyndham Lakes development here behind us, where that suspected shooter was taken into custody. We're working to get more information about this shooter. Still no name that we can publicly say at this point, or anything about a motive. We do know it's Valentine's Day, and what's otherwise supposed to be a happy day now turned to tragedy here in Coral Springs. And we're going to walk away. We're going to edit some of that video. We're going to flip it around for you and have a live update as soon as we can. Back to you.
Before you go, Michael, and forgive me if you already answered this question, but we're getting information as well. Just can you give us the proximity to the school of of where Wyndham Lakes development is at? Because by all accounts, the suspect was walking in the area when he was apprehended. How far are you right now from the school?
By some estimates, about three-quarters of a mile, so less than a mile from that school. If we were to head to my left up this way, Coral Ridge Drive, you would get there in no time, Jackie. So very close, and it makes sense when you look at the video, this new video we have of him on the side of the road explaining why he was on foot at that point. So very close to the school.
Michael, do you know if that, where you're located, is that south of the school? Are you in an area south of the school?
Yeah, we were in an area about southwest of the school. So when we were coming this way from Coral Springs Parkway, we had to get off on University. We tried to go north at that point, but there's gridlock traffic with a lot of parents, as you can imagine, parked on the side of the road right there. And at that point, if you were to be going north, you would have the high school on your left. So we tried to do a big loop around to come back this way to come to this development.
So you have been listening to our sister station, our NBC affiliate in Miami, continuing coverage of another tragedy, another school shooting. This happening at one of the largest public high schools in Broward County. This all started to unfold before 3 o'clock this afternoon. That is when gunfire erupted inside of this high school. We've been looking at this video, just shocking to see it happening again. Students making their way out of the school. You see SWAT team officers there on the ground, students running for cover today.
Let's tell you what we know right now. Tonight, the Broward County Sheriff reporting that the suspect is in custody. This is aerial video of someone being placed into a patrol car near the school while wearing handcuffs. The description of that young man in a maroon shirt is what people have been reporting of seeing the shooter at the school. So we know that the sheriff is describing the shooter as being about 18 years old and not a current student. He also adds that the suspect was arrested without incident off campus. So tonight, we know that there are at least 14 victims involved in the shooting. We have also heard that there are numerous fatalities in this school shooting.
It's not clear, though, how many have been killed. We heard the superintendent say right now numbers we just don't know. This is still a very, very active scene there in Broward County at this public school. Right now, what's happening is SWAT team members still going through. This is a very large, expansive campus with lots of buildings. And so right now, while they do have the suspect in custody, they are going through meticulously, room by room, building by building, to make sure that the scene is clear. But it is still, right now, as you see, very, very active.
To give you an idea of where this is all happening, this is about 300 miles down the Florida Turnpike in the town of Parkland. The shooting taking place inside of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Once again, one of the biggest schools down in Broward County. On your screen, we're about to take a look at some more live aerials of what's been happening. Over the past hour, we've seen dozens of parents rushing to the scene to search for and reunite with their frightened children. We've also seen cell phone video shot by people from near the scene. Just a horrible, horrible tragedy that we hate to talk about. This is not something we like to report on, and we hate to see this happen again. Florida Congressman John Rutherford tweeting this out tonight, keeping the students and their families at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in my thoughts and prayers as we await more information about the situation unfolding in Parkland.
And we want to bring in now our crime expert, Ben Carroll. Ben, you're a former police chief, a former SWAT team member, and Ben now travels the country training SWAT teams, also training churches on security. And I know now you're getting ready to start adding to the list private schools to teach them what to do if there is something like this, an active shooter situation. And first, I mean, Ben, when you see this and there's another school shooting and we know there have been more than a dozen victims, what is your reaction? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Just my heart is just broken. My prayers are for the victims and the families that are going to have to go through this tragedy, and the healing that's going to take place. It's going to be long term.
And Ben, I know you're an expert in situations like this. Let's just get right to it. What can we do to protect our children in schools? What is there to do?
Well, it's we have to go back and we have to have a plan. And we have to train that plan. We have to drill it, just like we did fire drills back in the day or back in the atomic age where we did the duck and tuck. We have to have drills and we have to practice those drills. I heard the fire alarm was pulled here. Worst thing that could happen, because what it does is people fall into that drill. We tell people don't pull the fire alarm during an active shooter. because we want people to shelter in place, lock the door. And a fire alarm makes them think that it's a fire instead of an active shooter. And then we also have our fire department responding instead of our law enforcement.
And we heard students say today that this morning, I think during second period, there was a fire alarm that the school had, and students all came out, and then they heard the fire alarm a second time, not expecting anything. And then we heard that video taken presumably by students inside of a classroom where you could hear just the echo of a gun firing over and over and over again. You listened to that video, just your analysis, what kind of weapon was used in the shooting from what you were able to hear?
Well, I could tell it was either a large caliber handgun or a rifle. You could hear that he was pulling the shots off individually. It was not an automatic weapon.
So as a former SWAT team member and training SWAT teams all across the country now, what is happening right now? We know the SWAT teams are on the ground. The sheriff's saying it's not a cleared situation. They're still looking at every building, every room. What's taking place right now?
Well, right now the threat has been eliminated or isolated. And now the SWAT team is clearing the rest of the school room by room and looking for additional threats and looking for maybe students that are still hiding. And the ones that are still locked down, they're moving in and providing them with comfort and providing them with medical care as they move through.
And we just learned that the sheriff just confirmed that the shooter is a former student. Earlier we were saying that we knew that the shooter was not a student, but the sheriff just confirmed that the shooter, an 18-year-old, is a former student there at that school. So Ben, one thing that we noticed, we saw the video of who we believe is the shooter being arrested there. You say sometimes in these situations when it comes to a shooter, an active shooter at a church, at a school, wherever, that they usually don't have an exit plan, that they just kind of walk off.
That's correct. Most shooters usually plan on dying at the scene, and so they don't plan on how they're going to get out of there. I'm not surprised that they did find him just walking down the street in a neighborhood. He probably never had an exit plan. He had a target probably within the school. He had a motive, and he entered in and executed that plan. Upon completion, he didn't think, what next? So he just walked away.
Ben, you know, I know a lot of moms and dads are probably watching this and just thinking, oh my gosh, if that ever happened at my child's school. And for students who may be watching, when the unthinkable happens, what is the first thing that they should be doing?
Well, for parents, they're going to be asked to respond to a certain location. And it's not going to be the school. They shouldn't go rushing into the school because they're going to create more traffic and more tie-up, and more first responding resources are not going to be able to get to the school and potentially evacuate from the school. Typically our schools have a secondary place they're going to direct the parents to for reunification with the children.
And so for the students who are there in the school and they hear the shots fired, they hear the fire alarm going off, what should they do?
They should shelter in place and immediately start planning their response in case they are faced with a shooter. What are they going to do? How are they going to stop the shooter from trying to make them a victim?
And tonight, as parents are, I know, hugging their children a lot tighter, what kind of conversation should they be having with their children?
Well, this is not the norm. This is an insane act, and you can't put sane thought to it. You can't reason this out. So they need to let their children know that they are safe going to school, that active shooters in schools or in public places are very, very small, very relatively a small statistic in crimes across the United States. However, that if they are faced with an active shooter, just like if they're faced with a tornado, they need to have a plan. Those that fail to plan to fail. So we need to give them a plan and give them resources and let them know it's okay to fight back if someone pulls a gun on them and they're potentially going to be a victim.
And as we mentioned earlier, we know the schools have approached you wanting to have some type of training. What do you normally hear from them? What are the questions that they have?
Well, a lot of it is their school safe? A lot of the things we look at is how will the student or the shooter get on campus? And right up front, everything that any violence or crime that's going to come into the school has to come across the parking lot. So we start at the furthest point away from the school, still on school property, and that is by securing the parking lots. We want to make sure that it's difficult for someone who has no business to be at the school not to come directly and pull into the parking lot, be hidden from view, and then all of a sudden just show up in the school administrative office.
We saw the students coming out. We saw some of them with their hands on each other's shoulders. I assume that law enforcement was telling them to do that because in a situation like this, with law enforcement responding in so much chaos, they don't know in the beginning who's the shooter and who are the innocent bystanders.
Exactly. They don't know who the shooters are. And they don't know how many shooters are there.
Right.
They're just looking for suspects, and they're trying to recover evidence. And the goal is to stop the killing and then stop the dying.
Is there anything you would tell our local teachers here across the First Coast when they have school tomorrow? If their students have questions for them, what would you tell them?
Follow their school plan. The school plan is for an immediate lockdown. I've seen schools accomplish lockdowns with children out on the athletic fields in under a minute. It can be done. They just have to get all the kids coming into the classroom that they can get in and then lock the door and treat any injured, contact their office or wherever their communication center is and let them know how many children they have in the room with them and let them know if there's any injured or sick.
And do you think our schools, when you look at it, traveling all over the country, are our schools here on the First Coast, are we prepared? Are we doing enough to prevent or to stop or you know, are we prepared enough for a school shooting?
I believe you can never be prepared enough, but our schools are prepared. They're constantly in a preparation phase. They're constantly looking for different ways to lock down the school, different ways to identify school problems before they get onto school property. They're working very close hand in hand with law enforcement and our school resource officers.
Okay, Ben, we're going to continue our conversation with you in just a minute, but we want to go now to First Coast News at 5:30.